So in part 1, we're going to look at these questions right here. So for example 1, we have AB minus B squared when A equals 2 and B equals -3. So in this section, we are evaluating, meaning that we are taking a value that they give us and we are plugging it in to the equation. All right. Of course, after we plug it into the equation, then we have to do the order of operations, which is what we previously talked about. So if I put a 2 in for A, and every time you plug something in, make sure you put it in parentheses. So this 2 just went in for A. For B, I'm going to put in a -3. Then I have my minus sign. Then for B, I'm going to put in a -3 again. And then it's squared. So in the original equation, everywhere where you see the letter A or that variable, we're going to replace it with a 2 and we're going to put it in parentheses. For B, everywhere you see the B, you want to plug in that -3. All right. Now that we have it like this, we can work it out. So we do want to follow the order of operations, which is PEMDAS. All right. So parentheses, we don't have any parentheses, meaning something that's in a group that has to have an operation happen. So now we go to exponents, and that is this section here, which would be 9. Then we do the multiplication, which would be 2 times -3, which is -6. So we should get -6 minus 9. Then from here, if we do that in our head or in our calculator, we'll get -15. Okay? So let's look at the second example. First, we're going to plug in everywhere we see an A, we're going to plug in 3, and everywhere we see a B, we're going to plug in -4. And it may help to rewrite it and just put those parenthesis groups in there. So I'm rewriting the whole thing. But instead of putting my letters in, I'm creating a space so that I can plug in my numbers. All right. So 3 squared is 9. Minus, then we have -4 squared, which is 16. Then we have 3 minus -4. So when we subtract a negative, that means we add. So it's actually 3 plus 4. All right. So 9 minus 6 is -7. 3 plus 4 is +7. So -7 divided by 7 is -1. All right. Now let's look at example 3. So for X, we're going to plug in 2. And here where we have parentheses, we want to change those parentheses into brackets. And then we're going, when we plug in the X and the Y, then we're going to make those parentheses. So the X is 2 and the Y is -1. and our z is 3. Okay? So the reason why we want to change this into brackets is so that it can look different and we won't confuse ourselves. So now that we have everything plugged in, of course we want to look and make sure that we see everything is plugged into the right spot. Now we can do our order of operations and work it out. So the first things that we need to figure out are the parentheses or the brackets, and then our exponents. All right, so we know that 2 squared is 4. We know that 3 squared is 9. Inside of these brackets, we have 2 minus -2, which is 2 plus 2. No, 2 plus 1. So we have 3 inside of the brackets. So we can rewrite this. So we have 2 squared minus 3 times 3 minus 3 squared. Then we have 4 minus 3 times 3 minus 9. Then we can multiply this section. So we have -3 times 3, which is -9. And then we have 4 minus 9 minus 9. So for part B, we are using properties of addition. So make sure that you guys look at that information in the notes. Hopefully everybody got -14. Some of the vocabulary words that you guys need to know for part A are terms, variable terms, constant terms. And for part B, you need to know like terms. So like terms are, if we look at example 1, 5y and -11y are like terms because both of them have a y present. So that means that the number in front of them, we can just do our operations with that number. Kind of like it's 5 apples minus 11 apples. So we'll just do our work with the 5 minus 11 and it'll still be apples at the end. So that's basically how the like terms work. You can only combine things that are alike, and we call that combining like terms. So make sure you guys read the distributive properties and all of that, the associative, commutative properties, all of that information you guys need to read. So for number 1 in section part B, 5y minus 11y, all we have to do is 5 minus 11. And basically I took the 2 coefficients in the front and put those together, and we still have our y. If I multiplied this back through, I would still have that original answer. So this is an example of using the distributive property to help me find my answer. So 5 minus 11 is -6. So we have -6y. If we look at example 2, we have 5 plus 7p. And 5 is a constant term, which means it does not have a variable. And 7p has a variable of p. So these two numbers are not alike, so we cannot combine them. So this is as simplified as it can go. So if you get a problem like this, all you have to say is, is in its simplest form. All right. So let's look at number 3. We have 8x plus 4y minus 8x plus y. So we technically have 4 terms. This is a term, this is a term, this is a term, and this is a term. Okay? So now we need to figure out our like terms. So this term has an x, this one has a y, this one has an x, and this one has a y. So this one, the 8x, is like the negative x. And the 4y is like the y. So now we add the things together that are alike. So we have 8x minus 8x, which will be 0, because 8 minus 8 is 0. So we have 0 x's per se. So we don't have to write it if it's 0. Now we look at the y. We have 4y plus y, which if we have just one letter here is 1y, but we don't write the 1, okay? So this is technically 4y plus 1y, which is 5y, all right? So when we have just x or just y, it's a 1 in front of it. It's only one of them. And we don't write the 1 in front of it because it's understood, okay? So that's the answer to number 3. For number 4, let's look at our terms and let's find the things that are alike so we can figure out what we need to combine. So here we have x squared, we have x squared, x, and then we have 1, which is a constant. So everything that has x squared can be combined because that variable is alike. So 4x squared minus 6x squared, we're basically looking at 4 minus 6, which is -2. And we keep that variable that they have alike. Now we look at another like term that we have, which is x. We have 5x and we have -2x. So when we combine those, we have 5 minus 2, which is +3x. And lastly, we have +1, which we don't have anything to combine it with, so we just keep it as is at +1. So this is how you combine like terms. So for number 5, we have a term with the x, a term with the y, a term with the x, and a term with a y. So if we combine our x's and we combine our y's, -7x plus 11y, because we did 3 minus 10, which is -7, and we did 4 plus 7, which is +11. For number 6, we have an x squared term, and we have a constant term and a constant term. So when we combine our x squareds, we'll have 5x squared because we have a 1 in front of here and a 4 here. So we got 1 plus 4. Then we look at our negative 7 minus 16, which is negative 23. So our final answer is 5x squared minus 23. Now let's get into part C. So in part C, we are looking at some properties of multiplication. So let's look at these examples. So first we have 2 times negative x. All right. So whenever we have a negative x or just a x, it's a 1 in front of it. So this is basically negative 1x, okay? And if you have a question about that, it's in all of that material that I posted for you guys to read. What we're basically looking at is 2 times negative 1, which is negative 2x, okay? So we're in a way kind of separating that negative 1 from the x and multiplying it by the 2. And this, you will see this in your different properties, okay? In the associative property and in the commutative property. So if we're looking at example 2, remember when we multiply fractions, we can just multiply straight across. 3 times 2 is 6x, and 2 times 3 is 6. So that's 6x over 6. 6 over 6 is 1. Remember, if we take something and divide it by itself, we get 1. So the answer is just x, okay? Another thing that we can do is at this point, if we understand that we're going to be multiplying straight across, we can start crossing out at this point. We know that 3 over 3 is going to be 1, and 2 over 2 is going to be 1, and we're just left with x, all right? And this property is the inverse property of multiplication, all right? So let's look at number 3. We have 16x times 2. So we need to multiply the 16 and the 2 to get 32x. As we have test 1 this week, if you need to make an appointment for the office hours, please take advantage of that. So for number 4, we have negative 2 times 3x squared. So what we're looking at is the negative 2 and the 3, okay? We can't multiply anything concerning the x squared because we don't have anything like it to multiply it by, if that makes sense. So we have to multiply the two numbers together. So negative 2 times 3 is negative 6, and we keep our x squared. Here for example 5, we look at negative 5 times negative 10x. Once again, we're looking at the negative 5 and the negative 10. So our answer is 50x. Remember, a negative times a negative is a positive. So we get 50x. If we look at example number 6, you can multiply it straight across, or you can use the shortcuts because we know that 3 over 3 cancels because it's actually 1. So we have negative 2 over 4x, and we can simplify negative 2 over 4 to negative 1/2 x. So with these problems, you want to multiply the number times the coefficients, which is the number in front of the variables, and then you want to simplify like how we did here. So for part D, we are simplifying variable expressions using the distributive property. So in the information that you're going to read, you're going to see that with the distributive property, we have some terms inside of a group of parentheses, and we have a number out in front that we are going to multiply into that group of parentheses. So the same way in part C, we took those numbers and multiplied it by one term. Now we're going to take those numbers and multiply it by several terms, okay? So if we look at example 1, this 3 out front has to be multiplied by the 2x and by the 7, all right? So we first need to think about what is 3 times 2x, and then we keep our plus sign, and we have 3 times 7, all right? So definitely write this step to see exactly what you have to do. So 3 times 2x is 6x, and 3 times 7 is plus 21. All right, so that is the final answer for that one. So let's look at number 2. We have -5 times 4x plus 6. So we can write this step, -5 times 4x plus, and I'm going to put the -5 in parentheses and my times 6 in parentheses, so I can make sure that I know that that negative sign goes with that 5, okay? So -5 times 4x, we got -5 times 4, which is -20, and we keep our x. And then we have plus, but we have -5 times 6, which that is -30. All right. So hopefully you all are doing good so far. Let's keep on going. For part 3, we have just a negative out front of the parentheses. So the same way -x equals -1x, this negative out in front of this parentheses is the same way. It's basically a -1 out in front, or we can say we're going to distribute the negative through. And what that basically means is that everything inside of the group, the sign is going to change. So where this is positive, now it will be negative, and where this is negative, now it will be positive. So we distributed that -1 through, which means we multiply everything by -1. For example 4, we have a -1/2 out in front, which means we have to multiply -1/2 by 8x and by -12y. But one thing I want you to notice about multiplying by -1/2, because this is a fraction, and fractions we multiply straight across. So if we multiply this straight across, then with this 2 being in the denominator, it's basically like we're dividing everything by 2. So with that being said, If we look at 8x divided by negative 2, we will have negative 4x. If we look at negative 12y, if we divide that by negative 2, we will have positive 6y. So while you're looking in the notes, make sure you look at this example. If you have any questions about it, we can definitely talk about it in the office hours. But you can multiply this, multiply negative 1/2 by each term, or you can divide each term by negative 2. So for number 5, for this one, we have a little bit more going on. So we have 4 times x minus y minus 2 times negative 3x plus 6y. So for this one, I'm going to write out a couple of more steps for you guys. So we have 4 times x, 4, we have our minus sign, and we have 4 times y. Then we have this negative sign here, this negative 2. It's going to have to be multiplied by this term and this term. So we have negative 2 times negative 3x, and then we have negative, going to keep that plus sign, and I'm going to do negative 2 times 6y. So now we just multiply each one of these. 4 times x is just 4x. Negative 4y is just negative 4y. Negative 2 times negative 3x is positive 6x. And then we have negative 2 times 6y. We have negative 12y. So hopefully everybody got that the answer is 10x minus 16y. For example 6, 7, and 8. For number 6, the answer is 12x minus 6y minus 3z. For number 7, the answer is 4x minus 12. For number 8, the answer is 15a minus 21b. For number 9, we're going to take this 3 and multiply it by each term. So 3 times x squared is 3x squared. 3 times negative x is negative 3x. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. If we look at number 10, we have a 2x here, and then we have a minus 3. Now this minus 3 has to be multiplied by each term. So we're going to keep our 2x. Then we're going to do negative 3 times 2x, which is negative 6x. Then we're going to do negative 3 times negative 7y, which is positive 21y. Now we need to look and see if we can combine some like terms. And this has an x and this has an x, so we can combine that 2 minus 6 to be negative 4x. And then we have plus 21y. Now let's look at 2 more. For this one, we have 7 times x minus 2y minus negative x minus 2y. So this 7 has to be multiplied by both of those, and this negative has to be multiplied by both of those. So 7 times x is 7x. 7 times negative 2y is negative 14y. Negative times negative x, remember a negative times a negative is a positive. Then we have a negative times a negative 2y. Once again, that turns into a positive. Now we can combine like terms. So all of our x's we can combine. We have 7x plus x, which is, we know that's 1x. So we got 8x. Then we have negative 14y plus 2y. So that's basically negative 14 plus 2, which is negative 12. And we keep that y variable. So for example 11, our answer is 8x minus 12y. For example 12, this one we have even more stuff going on. We have some parentheses, some brackets, all of this. So remember, we still have to do our order of operations. So we're going to start here. Then we're going to work our way out. All right. So I'm just going to copy everything down. Now I'm going to take this negative 3 and multiply it by the x, and it's going to be negative 3x. And I'm going to take this negative 3 and multiply it by the 7 and get negative 21. All right. Now inside of our brackets, we want to look and see if we have any like terms, and we do. So I'm going to rewrite this, and inside of our brackets, we have 2x minus 3x, which is negative x, and then we have minus 21. All right. Now that we have that simplified in our brackets, we can look to this negative 3 and multiply that negative 3 by each term. So we have 2x, we're just bringing it down. Negative 3 times negative x is going to be positive 3x. And negative 3 times negative 21 is going to be positive 63. So now that we have this part wrote out, we look and we see this term has an x and this term has an x. So we can combine that. The 2x and plus the 3x will be 5x. And then we keep our 63 because we don't have a common, like a like term to combine that with. So make sure that you guys read that material. Make sure that you guys are doing your work and that you guys are contacting me if you have a problem or concern with something. If you need to make an appointment for the office hours, make sure that you contact me. Make sure that you guys are reaching out so that we can solve these problems so that you don't fall behind and fail the class. Okay, so y'all have an awesome day. And while you're at home, go ahead and start looking over your objective 1 through 4 because the test is coming. All right, so go ahead and start preparing for that, as well as getting your notes and everything ready for objective 4 and doing your objective 4 homework.